So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews for Hospital Radio Reading and for my YouTube channel. And I'm super excited that my guest today is the fantastic Richard Huggett. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining me. How are you? How are things?
Thank you, Matthew. Things are great. Well, they are and they aren't. Bittersweet, I guess, with the announcement of Neighbours ending. No one's picked it up, unfortunately. So we all remain positive and, basically it is a celebration of 37 years of an amazing soap opera.
I mean, like you say, we'll talk more about Neighbours in detail soon. But I mean, of course, the last sort of couple of years, I would say the show is at its best. It is doing amazingly well, and the quality of it as well is just sky high. I mean, what are your thoughts on where the show is at the moment?
Yeah, mine are pretty much exactly the same. I started watching it again about 2 years ago because I was meant to come back then, but then COVID happened. So it was put off until July last year. And yeah, I was blown away by the quality of the writing and the production values. And yeah, the budget must have increased tenfold since I was on it in 1991 because you're out on location a lot more, and especially since September last year, we're going right out on location, doing a lot of location work. So yeah, it's great to work on.
And I mean, we'll talk a bit about the pandemic because I mean, how has it been for you? I mean, obviously you mentioned there that it obviously affected your return to Neighbours, but kind of when it all first happened, how did it affect you?
Well, I was living in Brisbane, actually. I moved from Sydney to Brisbane 5 years ago, and it sort of never really affected Brisbane. We had the first lockdown, which lasted, I think it was 10 days or something, for me, it was just so surreal. It was, you couldn't wrap your head around it, and especially looking at pictures of England where, there were deer in the streets or something like that in parts of England. So yeah, and then after that, Queensland pretty much wasn't affected by it. We had to wear masks and things like that. But even then, once the pubs reopened, everyone was back out, and it was like, what COVID? But New South Wales or Sydney and, Victoria and Melbourne, they were in lockdown for nearly 2 years. Especially Melbourne. And when I came back to Neighbours, I came down in July and I was in lockdown. But I was still impressed with the city. There was no one around, but I was going out, wow, this is amazing, this place, because I hadn't been here for 30 years. So, the only thing that really affected me was not coming back to Neighbours earlier. And also at the time I was working in events. So we had maybe a few days off, but ultimately I was events and staging of houses, that are being sold. So yeah, it didn't really affect us, Of course it did on the events side, but not in the delivery of furniture for houses that are being staged. So yeah, it was pretty minimal. I mean, apart from not being able to go to the pub as well.
I mean, we will go back and talk about kind of the early days of Neighbours, but how long have you known about the plans to bring Glen back? I mean, has it been going for a long time?
Yeah, I think it all came down to my agent. He sort of made the suggestion to Jason Herbison, the executive director, way back, 2 years ago. And yeah, it was all, do you want to go on? Yeah, sure. And I started watching it, and I was pretty excited, and it was going to happen, and then it just went by the wayside ultimately because of COVID. I think they had to get on with their storylines, and plus they were working on their COVID plan, which I think they were one of the first TV shows in the world to have a plan where they could still work, and other people took that plan and went with it as well.
Now, let's go back to sort of where it all began. I mean, first of all, where did the love of acting come from? Do you remember how you kind of knew that was where you wanted to sort of take your career?
It was probably very early. I think my mum tells me I was about maybe 7 or 8, and I used to watch, Australian television shows, police shows and all that. And I said to her one day, that's what I want to do. And so she, put me into classes, and I did a bit of theatre when I was much younger, and commercials. In high school, she pulled me out of high school because I hated school. just for periods of time to go off and do acting for television courses. Funnily enough, my grandfather on my mum's side was an actor. She never knew him, but apparently he had dreams and went off to New York, left them and went off to New York and never to be heard of again. My mother, she did some acting, directing, and was a makeup artist, or was a makeup artist. My sister was a makeup artist. So it's in the family in some way.
And then when did Neighbours come around for you? I mean, obviously it was back in 1990, I believe it was.
1990 or 91, I think, 91. And I was, I'd finished NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Art, 3 years there. And I went basically straight into a show called E Street, where I played the evil Sonny Bennett, who was a speed-addicted psychopath bent on revenge and killed off half the cast and created trouble all over the place. But that was only a very short stint, but a hugely popular character. So Neighbours picked me up from there. I auditioned for the role of Glen. And basically, I think it was probably in August or something, and I was down here in October of that year filming.
I mean, obviously, back then, Glen came in, obviously, as the secret son of Jim, and obviously there was so much tension between Glen and Paul. I mean, for you, when you got that character and sort of started the role, what was that like for you? What were your kind of memories of the role itself, and also, arriving on Ramsay Street?
Arriving, it was very different from E Street because it was shot differently, because I think on E Street it was shot with 2 cameras, whereas Neighbours back then was shot with 3 cameras, and there was a vision switcher, which means, they basically shoot it live and then just edit it there and then. So it was really fast. Although it's still fast, but it was much faster. And there wasn't as much coverage in terms of, close-ups, extreme close-ups. It was wide, mid-shot, close-up, that was it. There was very little location. It was all on Ramsay Street. And then arriving, it's daunting. It's like being, a new kid at school, really, I guess. But of course it happens quickly. You become friendly with everyone, and everyone's always very welcoming on shows. So, and, me and Stefan got on really well, and me and Alan Dale got on really well. So, it was great.
I mean, obviously, for a lot of the audience and a lot of the viewers, when your character obviously eventually left, it was a storyline that for a lot of people, I think they felt that it had a lot of unfinished business. So did you ever imagine that you would come back to the show and that you would kind of get to not necessarily finish off, but continue that saga and that story?
I never really thought about it, because I had other things I wanted to do. I really wanted to go into film more than television. At the time, I didn't really enjoy that speed of television. That's all changed now. I actually enjoy the speed of it, because film is so boring because you're sitting around all day, or most days all day. And fun for the acting, but you get paid. I think someone said you get paid for the waiting around, and you do the acting for free. And I just wanted to go off. And of course I went to England, and I did a couple of plays and a panto over there. And then I basically just hung out in England trying to get work. But being Australian at the time was really hard. Even putting on a British accent, they would look and go, "Oh, but you're Australian." And it was really, really strange.
And of course, obviously, now that you've returned to the show, it's not just Stefan Dennis that you've obviously get to see again, because obviously Lucinda Cowden was on the show when you were originally on, and obviously she's back as well. So is that strange, kind of working with some people again that you haven't worked with for ages?
It is, in terms of we've all aged and matured, because we were just kids back then. Stefan was a bit older, but with Lucinda, we used to party quite a bit back then, and so it was strange seeing each other, but ultimately none of us have really changed. We all sort of look the same. And it didn't seem like 30 years when I went back this time. It seemed like maybe 10 years, so, yeah.
And would you say that because you're sort of a little older and a little wiser, would you say you're enjoying it more this time than you did the original time?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Back then, I think, you're young, you're ambitious, and it's all new, the fame and everything, that goes with it, sort of takes over a bit, or can be, can take over a bit rather than the work itself. Whereas this time, it's the work that I'm concentrating on. And plus, because it's not as popular in Australia as it used to be, you don't get recognised as much, which is great. Because that was one of the things going to England, being recognised everywhere you went, whether you'd been sitting down for dinner or on your way to the movies or, on a tube, it was just relentless. And it sort of put me off a bit. And just because I was quite young, couldn't really appreciate it and didn't know how to deal with it. Whereas these days, it's, just being that bit older, people ask for selfies. Yeah, sure. Whereas back then I would have been run away. And
now, I mean, obviously, since you've returned, there's been storyline after storyline. It's been fantastic. I mean, obviously, coming back first of all and doing those scenes, obviously, at the conference I believe that was filmed in Queensland. Am I right?
It was supposed to be, but because of COVID, we couldn't get there. So we actually shot it at Portsea in southern Victoria, basically.
And I mean, what was that like to obviously, be brought back and the mystery surrounding Glen, and obviously getting to work with Rebecca, who of course plays Therese, and Melissa, of course, who came back as Lucy.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, there was such good storyline as well. And as I said before, the writing is just so good. So it wasn't hard. I mean, and the director at the time, Kate Kendall, she was just like sort of all over my character and knew exactly, where I'd come from, what I'd been through, and how sort of it should be played rather than, it was collaboration. But so that worked out well. And then Rebecca, I've known for probably 35 years or something as well, because we were both up for a Logie Award, which is the television awards over here, for Best New Talent. I won. And so we've known each other since then. So yeah, when I came back this time, like, she's just so warm and giving and welcoming, and and we've got a great relationship, and great chemistry on the show too, I think.
And I imagine as well, now coming back, it must be fun getting to work with a lot of the newer cast who are up and coming, who, I imagine you learn a lot from them as well, because they've got a different kind of knowledge and sort of a new look on things.
Yeah, absolutely. They have a whole new way of acting. It's not as big as it used to be. It's like, which is understandable coming because of digital cameras and all that, So yeah, you do learn to bring it back down, and yeah, there's some great actors on there like Ben Hall and Chris Milligan. They're really good to watch.
And I mean, obviously, at the moment, we here in the UK have just seen the River Bend, which was an epic week of episodes. I mean, for you filming that, what was that like? Because that looked like a lot of fun.
It was intense and long hours and long days, and it was hot as well. It was really hot. But no, it was really fun. That's a really great storyline. I'm not in the really dramatic part of it, which, suited me down to the ground, just because it was such long days.
I mean, obviously coming back, knowing that the show is coming to an end, are you glad that you've been able to come back kind of to sort of say your goodbyes to the character and to be involved in the final?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's sort of like, just feels like it was the right time to come back. I had no idea that it was was up for, or contracts were coming up and all that with the Channel 5, until I got there, and I went, oh, okay. So when they actually announced it was ending, I don't think it was really a shock to anyone. And yeah, I think it is a great time to come back because there's so much focus on the show now. Then there's other old characters coming back, so hopefully get to work with some of them. And I think it'll go out with, a bang, not a bang literally, but it will go out with a huge celebration of what a great show it is.
And also, we've seen the early stages of Glen's secret daughter. I mean, that must be so much fun to do as well.
Yeah, well, see, I'm not one to go and find out what my storylines are. I read the scripts as they come in. So every week I'm just like, oh my God, yeah, this is happening, that's happening. But that is really fun to play. But in a way, it's sort of so hard to play because it's so complicated of she not knowing, I know, she doesn't know, and I can't let anyone else know. They all think I'm weird. So, yeah, it's complicated.
And I mean, obviously, as we near the end of the show, obviously no spoilers, but for you, are there any characters you would love to see come back? And where would you love to see Glen at the end of the series? What would you love to see as his final scene?
Final scene, I'd like to see, I just think I'd like to see resolution, you know, maybe with him and Kiri, and just resolution with Paul would be good. Whether that can happen, I'm not sure, because they have a very strange relationship. It's always, you know, yes, they're matey and then they're not, and yes, they are, no, they're not. So there are some amazing storylines coming up for Glen, Paul, Therese. And I think, you know, it'd be good if Guy Pearce would come back. I'd love to work with him. Jason Donovan as well, you know, but I really wouldn't know if they are coming back.
And I mean, of course, the other thing we must ask is there's the kind of the relationship between Glen and Therese. Would you like to see them together, or do you think that Therese is better suited to Paul? I say that and it sounds wrong, but where would you like to see that go?
I think the connection Therese and Glen have, I would like to see them get together. I don't know what would come out of that, what would come out of that in terms of Paul and that relationship. Yeah, so I would like to see that happen.
Now, I just want to say it's been a pleasure talking to you, but before we go, is there any messages you'd like to give to anyone who's listening in hospital at the moment, or to the amazing sort of doctors and nurses out there that are providing great care?
Oh, look, if you know, for anyone laying in hospital, just hope you get well and get better soon. Keep watching the show because there is some really, really entertaining stories coming up. And to all the doctors and nurses, just thank you and God for what you've been doing over the last 2 years. You really are saints, you know.
Now, we just have to say, obviously, Neighbours is on 1:45 and 6 o'clock here in the UK on Channel 5. Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for giving up your time. Of course, keep safe.
Thanks,
and you're welcome back anytime.
No worries. Thank you at all.